Hi, I'm Chris Sarandon. Welcome to Cooking by Heart, where we revisit the vivid memories of food we grew up with and the stories and the people attached to that time in our lives. Today, we're fittingly coming to you from JP's Diner, which is smack dab in the middle of the campus of Sacred Heart University here in Fairfield, Connecticut. Today, I'm talking to Greg Proops, who describes himself as a stand-up comic from San Francisco. The Proop Dog, as he likes to be called, is best known for his unpredictable experiences on Whose Line Is It Anyway, both in the US and the UK. He also has a hit podcast called The Smartest Man in the World. Proops is also a member of an improv group called Who's Live Anyway, which is currently touring nationally, and his book, The Smartest Book in the World, is based on that podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm thrilled to introduce Greg Proops.
Hello, everybody. Chris.
How are you?
I'm real well, thank you.
Good. Welcome. Something that occurred to me, we had a conversation a few days ago, and it occurred to me, one of your kind of through lines in your story is provenance. We all have a provenance, where we came from, but your provenance is kind of trifurcated in a way. It's sort of three-pronged. Can you tell us about that? Where you came from?
Well, I'm from San Carlos, a small white community south of San Francisco. How white? Home of the Plain Yogurt Festival. And take the fruit out. The powerful taste is burning our tongues. My mother was from Mississippi, and my father was from Brooklyn. And so there was that conflicting southern East Coast thing going on at all times.
But you were born someplace else.
Oh, I was born in Arizona, right? In Phoenix. We didn't live there very long, but of course I have loads of relatives in Arizona and spent, when we go back to visit my sisters and whatnot, we were always in Arizona as well. So yeah, my mother had moved from Mississippi to Arizona when she was, she must have been a teenager. She had like 100 siblings. And they came out of, I'm not kidding. This is going to sound like John Steinbeck, but my mother's mother and father were farmers in Mississippi, and they drove a Model A truck with all of the kids in it and the dog to Casa Grande, Arizona. This is in the 30s.
Grapes of Wrath.
Totally. And set up, I'm sure there's a Dorothea Lange photo of my family. Actually, there is a photo of them that one of my sisters had of them all in the Model A truck, right? With the
I'd love to see that photo.
Holding one of the babies,
Right.
Because, my family's Southern, so my grandmother was like 5 years older than my mother, and, they went to school together. And so there's that side, and there was 100 siblings over there. And then my father's family is, Jews from Brooklyn.
From Brooklyn, right. What was the family name?
Proops, sadly.
Proops.
And
yes. What was it? Was it shortened over time?
Chris, I'd love to say that it was. I'd love to say that it was Prupensky or something, but if I was Greek, like you.
I was Sarandonidis, actually, my family.
Sarandonidis?
Sarandonidis.
Really? Sarandonidis. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
It was originally Proupalaikas. And no, it's actually Proops. I didn't really think much about it until, of course, I got old enough to talk, and then everyone could make fun of me. But we went to Prague years ago, my wife and I, and on the wall of the synagogue there, which is a famous synagogue in Prague, because Czech Republic deported somewhere in the neighborhood of 80,000 Jews.
Wow.
Was a wall of names, and on the names, every derivation of Proops, because Probst and Proopus and Propus and all these other names are. So there's a family, evidently, of scatological sounding names. And there was famously an advice columnist in England in the 70s and 80s named Marjorie Proops, who was a married Proops. She married a man named Proops. And so when I first went to England, everyone would say, "Are you any relation to Marge?" And what they call advice columnists in England, you might know, they call them agony aunts.
No idea.
Agony aunties, which is a very English. And so, yes, I'd say I have an aunt.
Yes.
And she's my agony aunt. So yeah, my father really loved we would have Chinese food on Sunday, which is like a
very, very much a tradition, New York tradition. Yeah.
Right. The Brooklyn Jews. And then, there was a deli in Burlingame called the Brothers that we used to go to. I don't know if it's still there. I took my wife there years ago when we were first going out. And, we'd get matzo ball soup and pastrami sandwiches and whatnot. He was that kind of thing. He was pretty heedless of what he ate. Like, he would also put like chocolate bars into soda pop. So there was a kind of a do that we had in the 60s where we really didn't care. And, or he didn't.
We put peanuts in ours. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Peanuts. That's
right.
That's a total Southern thing.
And Dr. Pepper.
Right. Dr. Pepper. And then what was it? The other one in the South, Dr. Nut.
Mm-hmm.
And Royal Crown.
Royal Crown, knee high.
Yeah. Knee high.
Knee high.
Yeah, well, then, and those are the glory days of soda pop. But you go down to the filling station, and there'd be a giant cooler out in front of the filling station.
Right. Filled with ice.
The cooler, and there was a Disneyland of soda pops inside.
Right.
Every flavor, cherry, orange, lime,
Right.
Grape, soda.
Yeah. And Mom, her family was it the Savage family?
Yes, my mother's family's the Savages. She's from Mississippi. And so I reckon I have cousins down there. There was the big diaspora, of course, so they all live everywhere now.
Right.
Texas. She had 1 million brothers and sisters. I think there's about 2 or 3 left. So she was well-versed in down-home cooking. And then she worked at various restaurants always in her life.
Well, that's sort of where your parents met, right?
Yeah, they met at the Pink Pony in Scottsdale, which is a really cute bar. I think I'm certain it's still there.
Yeah.
When they're in training, all the ball players drink there, and it's Scottsdale's, a chi-chi little. Now it's like a boutique-y chi-chi place, but
right.
It was always kind of the suburb of Phoenix where you went to party, and the ball clubs always played there. The Giants have a club a spring training club in Scottsdale,
right,
which is my San Francisco, and they met there, and he was a bartender and sort of itinerant, ne'er-do-well. And my mother already had 3 kids. And so...
You described your father you described your father to me as a degenerate gambler. What did you mean?
Yes, that is something that gamblers call one another.
Yeah.
I'm not giving him the appellation degenerate.
Yes.
Out of the kindness of my heart.
This was a generic thing.
Gamblers call each other when they have it bad, because it's a terrible addiction.
I see.
When gamblers have it bad, they call each other degenerate gamblers, meaning you would steal the money from the piggy bank, anything, anything, and they call it staying alive. Are you alive? Meaning, do you have enough money to gamble?
To gamble, right? What was his favorite?
Horses.
Did you ever go to the track when you were a kid?
I grew up at the track. I was betting at the pari-mutuel window by the time I was 14.
Betting?
And and by the way, no one ever asked for my identification. I was a small teenager, a preteen even then.
Right.
And I learned how to bet, so I could come up to the window and I go, let me have the number 7 twice to place, whatever. And I want to, let me wheel the 3, 4, 5 or whatever. I want to baseball the 6, 8, 2 or whatever. And if you knew what you were saying, if you hesitate.
It's the vocabulary that got you in, not the card.
Right? It's like when you first start to drink and you're too young to drink. If you go, I don't know what I want, they go like, how old are you?
Right.
Or if you order a 7 and 7 or something.
Right. Or if you order a stinger, or if you order a beer with a bourbon back, you're in.
That's so. I grew up with the track betting, and
so then, what was it? Do you ever think about what the attraction was between your parents? Because they married fairly early on after they met. Did they?
They ran to Vegas. With a couple friends, and got married, which is a very 50s thing to do. And like I said, I think I was born like 9 months and 3 days after they got married. And my father would say delightful things to me like, the day you were born, which was October 3rd, 1959, he'd go, I won a bunch of money on the Dodgers because they beat the White Sox in the World Series. We got all won like $2,000 a day.
Those were the signposts for him. Yeah, not your birthday, but
yeah.
So, but the interim, because when I was talking about your provenance, it was Arizona, then Southern California, right?
That's
for
right.
Time.
We lived in Lancaster, which is out in the desert here. My father worked on at the Caravan Inn, which was a hotel there. He worked at the saloon, and I was a bartender. If I can tell you this one little story, it's kind of cute. I don't know. You'll remember this because so they would shoot Westerns in those days out there. This is the 60s. And a show called Run for Your Life with Ben Gazzara, which was one of those anthology shows where people ran from town to town, kind of like The Fugitive or whatever. Like you'd have a different adventure what was the Christopher George one? The Immortal, right? He couldn't die and they were chasing him to find out why he would live forever. Anyway, Jackie Coogan was drinking at my dad's bar. And Jackie Coogan, as you know, was Uncle Fester on the Addams Family, but was also the biggest child star in the world in the 20s because he was in The Kid with Charlie Chaplin. His parents drank and gambled all his money away. And he ended up on the Addams Family for him. And in any case, my dad comes home one day and he says, we're going to go see the Addams Family shoot in LA. We're driving into Hollywood. So I'm like, awesome. I think I was 5, kindergarten. And so we went there and I'd never been in a studio, of course. And I saw the Beverly Hillbillies cast going into their sound stage across the way. We went in, there was the set with Cleopatra, the plant and whatnot, which I wouldn't get near because I was sure it was going to attack me. And the door, the front door set that had the knob that people pulled that made the terrible noise. So I was afraid to pull it because I thought that I would believe the whole thing. And then the enormous living room that the Addams Family lived in with the shark leg on the wall. I mean, the shark with the leg coming out of it and the giant turtle. And John Astin was there in a bright blue suit reading a pink script. These are what you remember.
Of course. Yeah. It's those details. Right.
I didn't speak to John Astin, who, by the way, is still alive. But I remember what he was wearing, and that it was all in color because on TV it was black and white. And it was so colorful. The set of the Addams Family was green and in the garden and the living room had a bright magenta rug and it was really Baroque. And so we went to see this shoot and they were down in the dungeon, right? And so they'd fill the dungeon with smoke. And it was the first time I see a clapper, right? They go, 15 apple, right? And it's him and Mama. And they shot a while. And I'm at this point losing my mind because I didn't, it was all magic to me.
Yeah.
So Coogan comes up to sit we were in the bleachers. No one else was there. It wasn't shot in front of a live audience. He comes up into the bleachers after he's finished shooting. And I won't repeat what he said, but it was a string of invective, the likes of which had not been heard since the streets of New York in the 20s.
Right.
Mothers were referenced in terms of conjugal visits.
Really?
The male member was mentioned and it's in various acts.
Iterations. Yep.
Several different iterations of that. And it was a blue streak. And I was 5, right? And first of all, Jackie Coogan actually spoke a good deal like he did as Fester in his real voice. He went, "Hey, Steve," to my dad. And then he said a lot of profanity. And they chatted for a minute. And then I said to him, "Can I ask you a question, Uncle Fester?" And he went, "Sure." And I go, "How do you make the light bulb light up when you put it in your mouth?" And I swear to you, Chris, my first experience with show business, he goes, "It's a trick, kid."
In your face.
Yeah. Now, mind you, he'd been around.
Yes, around and around.
Around and around.
Yeah, exactly.
So Thank you.
I'm gonna let's do this.
Told that.
Yeah, right. Let's get back to home life and food because I'm interested in you've talked about the fact that your mom was just such a superb cook, but a very eclectic cook, that she cooked everything. Where did she pick all this up?
Well, I think she worked at a Chinese restaurant. She told me.
Yeah.
And of course, her and my father both spoke pretty good. My mother spoke like serviceable Spanish. My father spoke fluent Spanish. And they both worked in restaurants their whole lives.
Right.
And when you work in a restaurant in the West, you have to speak Spanish.
Exactly.
And she'd worked so she could make Mexican food because she'd lived in Arizona for so long. And then she'd worked at this Chinese place. And she would make these awesome, like 50s Chinese dishes for us, like fantastically chop suey.
Oh.
And then the tinned crispy noodles that come in a can.
Yes.
That you pour on top of it, which I thought were the living end. And almond chicken.
Oh, yes.
Which was a great big deal then.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, all the different Mexican foods and whatnot. And then my father would he was Jones for like Brooklyn food. So my mother would make matzo ball soup and really make the matzo balls and everything. And
there was a secret to her matzo balls, right?
Well, chicken fat is the key to Jewish life. As you know, it's the
right. Schmaltz.
Yeah, schmaltz. It's Jewish penicillin and a lot of Southern food, like and
a lot of Mexican food as well.
Oh, it was always enchiladas, tostadas, tacos, and a taco in our family meant you took a corn tortilla and you threw it in a cast iron skillet. The cast iron skillet lived,
right? Still lives, yes.
Yeah, and you'd fill it with about this much grease or oil, and then the shell went in there, and then you fry it until it got crispy, and then you'd fold it. And then those folded shells went onto a paper towel, and then you made the taco meat and everything else, and then everything was put into
right.
That's how you make tacos,
right? And the fat that they were cooked in, was not canola oil or any heart-friendly oil. It was probably
not in those days.
Probably lard.
Well, she didn't use bacon grease for tacos, but it would be like just cooking oil. I'm reckon corn oil or something. And,
right. And then the Southern food
was, fried chicken and dumplings, pepper steak. I don't know if you remember that particular.
Oh, absolutely.
It was
we have that in my dad's restaurant. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was a really popular item in the South.
Yeah.
You don't really see it out in the West Coast very much, but it's steak and it's slightly peppery, and there's always bell peppers in it. And she didn't make chicken fried steak, but of course I love chicken fried steak. Because I don't care anymore. And lima beans, black eyed peas, not grits, but hominy.
Mm-hmm.
The actual hominy, right. Which is bloated corn puff.
Right.
Slathered in butter and salt and pepper.
Right.
Candied yams and green beans. And then when she made lentil soup, hot dogs went in it.
This is one of our degrees of separation, because when I was growing up in my dad's restaurant, they served baked beans with hot dogs in them.
Hot dogs?
Yeah.
But I mean, imagine putting a hot dog in something now and not telling anyone there's a chopped up hot dog.
Right.
And they were cut down the thing, so they were little discs of hot dog.
Right.
And everybody loved them. That was the bonus part. When you got to the spoonful of the baked beans that had the hot dog in it.
Yeah.
It was like,
oh, yeah.
So my mother put, and I'm sure your family might have done too, ham hocks, right? Yep. So if you were making like collards or greens, rather, collard greens, a big old messy hock of ham, which was just a fatty knuckle of a pig, would be chucked in there.
Right.
And that's where all the flavor is. I used to do a joke about it, say, if because people eat kale now and ramp and whatnot.
Right.
Kale doesn't make you cry. If you ate my mother's collards and you got that giant hunk of fat in your mouth, that's when the tear comes to your eye, because it's so rich.
Right.
Really good collard greens are the living end.
Oh, yeah. Now, you also mentioned to me when we were speaking that you have a story about going to Bermuda, was it? And
I'm sorry.
Going to Bermuda and having southern cooking there. What was that about?
My wife and I went to Bermuda a couple of years ago for fantastically. You'll love this. The Bermuda Comedy Festival. What? And so it was 5 comics. I assure you, that's it.
Yeah.
And normally a comedy festival like Montreal or Edinburgh, literally hundreds of comics. I mean, I've been to festivals all over the world, and this one had 5, and we all played in the same room. 1 show a night for like 4 nights. That was the whole festival. Just fantastic. So you got a week in Bermuda, and we went to the Marcus Samuelsson, who's a famous chef who has a notable restaurants. I don't know if he has one in LA, but certainly New York he's well known.
Definitely has in Harlem. He just opened one in Harlem fairly recently.
That's right.
Yep.
And I think I was telling you about going to one near the Museum of Modern Art.
Right. There's one in Midtown as well.
Very Scandinavian.
Yep.
17 kinds of gravel ox, 15 kinds of sturgeon and whatnot.
Yep.
The place heaving with Jews of a Sunday morning, like just because the smoked fish was,
right.
And quite good actually, in any case, we went to his fancy place in Bermuda. There was a Warhol of Mick Jagger, and there was all this modern art and like a Kenny Scharf, and you know what I mean? Like a really, chi.
Yep.
And Bermuda is like a banking haven where white people go to steal money from the world. And so it was on a dock with all these, pleasure boats and whatnot. And the food was down home. So it was the Bermuda food, which is fried fish. And then they did collards and then cornbread, whatnot, this and that. And the collards came, and they were unbelievably bad. They were too sweet. There was none of the punch that you get, even if you go to like West Virginia, for instance.
Yeah.
Where if you go to a down home place in West Virginia, they'll have in the trays the collards, the baked beans, the macaroni, the white bread,
Right.
And I said to my wife, I think my mother would flip over in her grave if she tasted these collard greens, because these aren't getting it done. And I was really like, I wanted to have a word with Marcus and go like, look, I know, dude, but
yes,
these collard greens are a terrible, paltry imitation. It would be like if I gave you pastrami in New York and I put mayonnaise on it and put it in, on French. Right. It's an insult to collard greens.
Right,
I know,
crime.
Because my wife makes them too, and she makes them fabulous.
Right.
They're supposed to be slightly bitter, and then definitely fat. I mean,
yep.
I know if you're vegan or whatever, but the fat is what's pushing the collard greens.
Fat is flavor. Yeah. Exactly. So speaking of flavor, around the family table, what was that like?
Well, my dad was fairly loud and bellicose, but reasonably, he was funny. I think my sense of humor is a combo platter of his sarcastic Brooklyn sense of humor and that sense of humor that I'm sure you're familiar with, that sort of sly Southern sense of humor.
Yep.
Where they'll say something so understated that you didn't realize they were making fun of you.
Right.
Because in the South, like, people will say things like, you'll say to them, oh, I have a complaint. I couldn't do this. I couldn't do that. And they'll go, well, bless your heart. And that means you're an idiot.
Yes, right.
And I don't care about it.
You don't see the knife coming.
No, because they're polite.
Yeah.
The manners are everything.
Right.
And
did your friends come over?
Oh yeah, because my mother would make far too much food for 3 people, and she'd make a whole lasagna or a whole turkey or a whole chicken.
Right, the groaning table.
Right, a roast beef, a roast pork, whatever. So yeah, people came over and they always loved it, and because there was tons of food and gallons of milk in those days. We were kids.
Oh yeah,
and then of course I think we talked about it before. Sweet tea, a sun tea.
Oh yeah,
so
that's very Southern, right?
Yeah, you'd like in Arizona when I'd stay with my sisters, whatnot. You get up in the morning and you have a jar that you've taken from something else, like you had pickles in it or whatever, a big ass jar, and 4 or 5 Lipton tea bags, just grocery store tea.
Yep.
And then fill it with water and then screw the lid on so that the strings are hanging out the side, but the bags are in the water. And for white people who are out there, they're like, what's happening? So you put it on the porch out and back where the sun's going to hit it all day long. And then bring it in about 5 when dinner's going to happen. And then you crack out all the ice that you've made that day. And then you transfer that to enormous, and of course in those days, big plastic pitchers that I'm sure you remember, some of which had the plastic top that had the lid thing that you pulled up to spout.
Pour that puppy out.
Right?
Yep.
And then loads of sugar. Everything came with sugar in those days. A friend came over the other night and we were talking about your mother's grapefruit fork, the one that was like grapefruit knife.
Right.
The specialist item that you used to carve the grapefruit up because it went around them and then down the slices.
Yep.
Then my mother would do that in the morning and then spoonfuls of sugar.
On the grapefruit. Yeah. Yeah. Very, very clear. Now, you also told me about a friend of yours who made a comment about your mom's way of serving food.
Oh, yeah. With Ed Krasnick, his mother had a bazooka so she could fire a bread roll in your mouth in case you were about to have an emotion.
Right.
Which food celebrated everything.
Yes, right. Including feeling. Yeah.
And anything you were dealing with, have another biscuit, have some more French bread.
Right.
And luckily we were in the Bay Area. So we were in San Carlos, as I say, which is south of San Francisco. So I did grow up with all the Bay Area food, which of course is crab and sourdough bread. You could always get sourdough bread even on the peninsula. And, so when you go, now they kind of have it everywhere, but in the old days, as you know, regions had their own food and you didn't get it outside of there. So you'd go to another place and buy a loaf of French bread and it would be awful. And you're like, oh yeah, are there Italians here? And sourdough bread is a real particular flavor. It doesn't, you can't fake it.
Yeah.
So I always loved all the foods from the Bay Area. There's an ice cream bar called It's that's 2 oatmeal cookies and a vanilla thing in between. Ooh. I don't know. There's always specific.
Yes, very specific to geography. Yeah, exactly. Right? Now, also, when you were growing up, your aunts and uncles were important in the food world.
Well, my Aunt Marge lived in Casa Grande, which is just outside of Phoenix. And my Uncle Ray was quite a little farmer, even with living in a suburb there. And he had a grapefruit tree and citrus, because it's Arizona. You citrus grows like mad.
Right.
And a swamp cooler. I think we were talking about that. When you didn't want an air conditioner, or I guess it cost too much or something, a swamp cooler was this sort of machine that blew air across fetid water so that you could all get Legionnaire's disease. And that's how it cooled the house down.
Right.
You would make Rice Krispie treats and cut them in the shape of a duck or a bunny and put little candies on the eyes and whatnot. And of course, I would go bananas on those.
Right.
And anytime we had a family thing, all my aunts and my sisters and my mother would make more Mexican food than ever had been eaten in the history of Mexico. And it would be trays of enchiladas. And of course, we would go berserk as children because tacos are awesome, and just make as many tacos as you could, right, and guzzle down and drink as much sweet tea as you could possibly consume. And my sister still makes it that way.
And there's a kind of a genetic line, isn't there, from your mom to your sister, in terms of the recipes and the cooking. She still cooks that way, yes?
Yeah, and sent me a cookbook that my mother, kind of an ad hoc cookbook. My mother never sat down and wrote a cookbook, but all of her, in her fantastic 1920s cursive, how to make this kind of cake and how to make this kind of, and always like salt and, Yeah, my sister sent me a copy of it a couple of years
ago.
ago.
Does your sister? You mentioned that there was no butter in the house. Does your sister still cook with margarine?
No, they've graduated too.
Oh.
Like I said, my parents in the 60s and 70s, the war's over.
Right.
The war is over. And then we have food again, and we're not on rations. So I wonder, might we have some butter? And butter costs too much. And so it was margarine in a tub, like a red plastic tub, and it with a yellow top. And then when that was gone, washed it. And then the green beans lived in there, or whatever the leftovers were. In the pot.
Right. In our house, it was the bacon fat that lived there. From the eggs in the morning, because you cook the bacon first, and then you cook the eggs in the bacon fat.
In the bacon.
Yeah, always.
And then sometimes at certain places, a coffee, and the dead coffee can was where all the bacon fat went, so that it formed a enormous wall of bacon.
Right.
My mother cooked bacon exactly that way, and sausages too.
Yeah.
And I'm allowed to only cook 3 or 4 meals here because my wife is an outstanding cook. She's amazing. And like I said before we came on, she made Ukrainian goulash last night in Trinity, Ukraine, which I'm very much looking forward to eating. And again, I'll cook breakfast every once in a while, and I'll do it in the skillet with the bacon.
With them.
Now I'll poach a couple eggs for my wife, but I'll throw a fried egg right in the bacon fat.
Yeah.
I should.
Oh, and the flavor is undeniable. Now, when you're traveling, because you travel with Who's Live anyway. Your improv troupe. What do you look for?
When
you're traveling, what do you look for in food?
When you're touring, there's nothing more important than where you're sleeping and where you're eating. That's really the whole show. Yes, there's the excitement of performing. But how people are, they'll go, well, what do you think of our town or whatever? And you're like, well, I've seen the baggage carousel and my hotel and backstage. So it's not like, although we do try to get out. So I look for try to not go to chains if I can avoid it, unless you're stuck at a turnpike or something and you have to go to a Bob Evans or a Waffle House. Although the Waffle House is pretty fun.
Waffle House, that rings a bell. You told me a story about the Waffle House and your doctor.
That's right. Fancy Beverly Hills.
Oh, please.
Orthopedic doctor. Doctor, he has the awesome biblical name of Ben Artsy. And because he's from Judea, evidently.
Yes.
And his parents came to visit him, and he was working in Alabama, and he took them to or as we call it in the South, the Waffle House, the Waffle House. And Waffle House, of course, is based on waffles, but the truth is it's based on hash browns. The Waffle House menu, which is a big plastic affair with pictures of the food on it, which I always love, because then you know what you're getting, right?
Right.
Go to a fancy place, you have to imagine it. Go to the Waffle House, there it is.
Everywhere.
What is it? Hash browns 8 ways? Like they've managed to think of 8 different ways to, there's the onions and the cheese and the thing. And his family are sophisticated Jewish people from the East Coast. And the mother says to the waitress, I'll have half calf, latte, and I want a whisper of cinnamon. And if you could, and the waitress, what the devil are you talking about? She goes, honey, we have decaf and regular.
Sanka?
And trying to explain to his mother, you're at a Waffle House. This isn't like,
right.
You're not at the Cafe Zabarski at the Neue Gallery. This isn't the Upper East Side.
Exactly.
There's no ordering half calf anything here.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
And if you'll know this, when you go to down home places, still in America, the toast is buttered. In LA, when you order breakfast, the toast is not buttered. The butter comes on the side because butter is your option to do.
Yeah.
Whereas everywhere else in America, if the toast ain't buttered already, like what?
Yep. That's the same with my dad's restaurant. The butter always arrived with melted butter brushed onto it.
Yeah, boom, boom, boom. And that's how.
Exactly. It's also interesting that the difference in regions in the country, particularly now, where places where you can find what we think of as artisanal food, we think of as being sophisticated and metropolitan, when the fact is that that's sort of spread all over the country, and you get exposed to that all the time.
That's the best part, I think, Chris,
especially in the South.
Oh my goodness! Like little towns in Tennessee, and you'll come upon a diner. There's a little gay diner, and I can't remember the name of it. Asheville, Tennessee, and which is people, the diaspora of people from cities, because no one can afford to live in a city anymore.
Yep.
They're not even going to Portland and Denver. That's long gone. So now they're going to tiny towns all around the Midwest, the South. So where once upon a time you would only get something crappy, now you really do get like farm to table stuff everywhere.
Right.
And then, oh wait, all of a sudden there's turkey sausage and vegan sausage, which that would have never happened when we were kids. And so yeah. Like
but you can also still get a lot of the food that your mom cooked.
Oh, absolutely. Like,
black-eyed peas and grits, which we had in our restaurant. My dad had in the restaurant. It was on the standard menu for breakfast. Every breakfast, there was always grits. Grits with a pat of butter in it. On the side was served with your bacon and eggs or your ham and eggs.
I love grits and eggs. I mean, I love hash browns more than life itself, but I really do grits and eggs.
Yeah.
And so, like, we're going to the South in 2 weeks' time, and it's going to be North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, all over, Spartanburg, whatnot, the real South, and Dixie. And that's the best part for us. Like a couple years ago, we were playing in North Carolina, and we ordered from this down-home restaurant, and shrimp and grits and fried green tomatoes and whatnot. Mm-hmm. Crew hadn't eaten there, and we'd ordered them food from it. And the old crew guys in the South, they're immune to any emotions.
Yeah.
They'd had Albert Lee there a couple nights before, which this really delighted me. I said, how was Albert Lee? Because he's about 75, 80. And the crew guy says to me, I'll tell you what, it was the loudest show I've ever seen in my life. He was playing about 150 dB.
Oh, boy.
And I was like, good for Albert Lee.
Yeah,
man.
right.
And, a boxy hall.
Right. He's probably past tinnitus and into nearly death. And who cares?
Yeah, I mean, right. He can't hear it no more.
Right, exactly. It's interesting because I'm stealing a quote from your book, but you quote Faulkner in the book as, in the South, the past is now, which I love. It's so extraordinarily apt. Greg, I wish we had much more time. I want to thank you so much for being here. We enjoyed having you. I wish you good eating on the road.
Well, thank you.
You're more than welcome. All right. Greg Proops, I want to thank him for joining me today in Cooking by Heart. As a reminder, his podcast, The Smartest Man in the World, is available on iTunes, I believe. And Whose Live Is It Anyway is touring nationally. Also a reminder that Greg's book, The Smartest Book in the World, is available at smartestbookintheworld.com. I got mine on Amazon. You'll enjoy it, believe me. Thank you, everybody. Great to talk to you. We'll see you next time on Cooking by Heart. Bye-bye.